Right now, across the American South, it is swallowing the landscape alive. It climbs telephone poles, following the lines into the distance. It buries abandoned barns and homes until they're just green mounds, unrecognizable from the road. It drapes whole forests in a single unbroken sheet of leaves. Moving up to a foot a day in high summer, it is a force of nature. People down there have a name for it. The vine that ate the South. Everyone hates it. Everyone sprays it. Nobody eats it. And almost nobody knows what's buried under it. Because underneath that hated vine is a root the size of a human body. Inside that root are compounds that, in Harvard laboratories and in real human trials, measurably cut how much alcohol people drink. A folk remedy for drunkenness that China has used for over 1,000 years, growing wild across a dozen US states, treated as nothing but a pest. Keep that root in mind, because the story of how it got here is the strangest reversal I have ever put on this channel. The most hated plant in America didn't sneak in. It was invited, planted on purpose, by the United States government. This is a story of unintended consequences and hidden value. Let's be clear about what this is not. This is not a rare herb from a distant mountain. It covers millions of acres. It is the poster child for invasive species, the punchline in 1,000 jokes about the South. And that is exactly why nobody looks twice at the root. When a plant is a running joke, you don't ask what's inside it. You certainly don't ask whether an industry worth hundreds of billions, the alcohol industry, might be comfortable with you never finding out. I'm not going to hand you a conspiracy. The truth here is stranger than a conspiracy, and it's on the public record. Let me show you. This is the story of Kudzu. Welcome to Landfield's lab. To understand it, you have to follow two threads that could not be further apart. The first is ancient, and it's Chinese. For well over 1,000 years, traditional Chinese medicine has used this plant. They call the root Gei Gen. One of its oldest, most specific uses is for drunkenness. Texts going back more than a millennium describe Kudzu root as a remedy for the drunkard, to sober the intoxicated. This wasn't a vague tonic. It survived 1,000 years of trial and error, precisely because people kept finding that it worked. It cooled the craving itself. It goes back further. Kudzu root was written into the foundational Chinese herbal text, the Shen Nongben Chao Jing, a cornerstone of traditional knowledge. By around the year 200, the physician Zhang Zhongjing built it into a famous formula still used today. But it was never only medicine, it was sustenance. Across China, Korea, and Japan, that giant starchy root has been food for centuries, peeled, pounded, washed, and dried into a fine, pale powder. In Japan, it's called Kudzu, and the starch, kuzuko, is prized enough that it appears in classical poetry as one of the 7 herbs of autumn. So while America was learning to hate this vine, half of East Asia was quietly eating it and dosing with it. A stark cultural divide on the same plant. Hold that thread, a 1,000-year-old food and anti-drinking remedy, because the second thread is where it collides with America, and the irony is almost too much. Jump to the 1930s, the Dust Bowl. Cotton and tobacco farming have stripped the soil bare, and the land is literally washing away in the rain. The government is desperate. The plant had actually arrived earlier. Kudzu was introduced to the US in 1876 at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. Japan built a garden showing off plants from home. Americans loved the big leaves and sweet flowers, and for years sold it as a pretty porch vine and shade plant. Nobody yet grasped what it would do turned loose on a warm, wet continent with nothing to stop it. The government did the turning loose. The newly created Soil Erosion Service, later renamed the Soil Conservation Service, launches a national campaign to plant kudzu. It hands out around 85 million kudzu seedlings. The Civilian Conservation Corps plants it along slopes and highways to hold the crumbling earth. And the government pays farmers a bounty, as much as $8 an acre, real money in the Depression, just to put this vine in the ground. It was an act of state. They called it the miracle vine. A radio host named Channing Cope preached kudzu to the South like a gospel from his porch in Georgia. The South was all in. Towns held kudzu festivals and crowned a kudzu queen. There were poetry contests and cooking demonstrations. It was the most celebrated plant in the South. But first, so you'd actually recognize what's under all that green. Above ground, Kudzu is unmistakable, a sprawling vine with big leaves in groups of 3. In late summer, it produces clusters of purple flowers that smell startlingly like grape soda. It smothers everything in a rolling green blanket. But the part that matters is underground. The root is enormous, a woody tuber that can grow longer than a person is tall and weigh as much as a small adult. Now the science, because a drinking remedy is exactly the kind of claim I expect to fall apart. In 1993, Harvard researchers published a groundbreaking study. They gave Syrian golden hamsters, animals that bizarrely will happily drink large amounts of alcohol, an extract of kudzu root. The results were immediate. The researchers isolated Y, a compound called daidzin, which turned out to be a potent selective inhibitor of an enzyme called ALDH2. When you drink, your body breaks alcohol down in 2 steps. First into a toxic chemical called acetaldehyde, and then that ALDH2 enzyme clears it away. Acetaldehyde is behind what makes heavy drinking feel awful, the nausea, the pounding head. Daidzin gently slows that second step down, so the acetaldehyde lingers a little longer, and drinking becomes a touch less rewarding and a touch more unpleasant. It's a natural echo of modern medicine. This one doesn't have to wave its hands, because human trials exist. Done at McLean Hospital, they built a lab to look like a comfortable apartment. They took heavy drinkers, gave them kudzu or a placebo, and then simply let them sit in the apartment and drink as much of their favorite beer as they wanted. The people who'd taken kudzu drank less, consistently. A week of kudzu significantly reduced the number of beers people drank in that session. Later work pinned much of the effect to a single isoflavone, puerarin. These were double-blind, placebo-controlled studies in actual human beings. The pharmacology was interesting enough that other labs kept pulling on the thread. Researchers used the molecular structure of daidzin as a template. They designed a cleaner synthetic version of it to help prevent relapse. A weed smothering the roadside became a template for serious drug developers. I have to be absolutely straight with you. Kudzu is not a cure for alcoholism. Nobody in these trials was cured. It took the edge off the wanting. It is not a substitute for medical care or recovery programs. If you or someone you love is struggling, the answer is a doctor, not a vine. So why has almost nobody heard of this? Because the government turned on it. Those plantings did exactly what fast vines do. They escaped. Free of the insects that kept it in check in Asia, kudzu began swallowing fields at up to a foot a day. The miracle vine became the monster vine overnight. By 1970, it was formally declared a weed. In 1997, the same government that once paid farmers to plant it officially listed it as a noxious weed. The reputation as America's most hated weed didn't just hide the pharmacology, it made it unthinkable. The root was completely buried. The label, useless invasive pest, is only half true. Both things are true at once. It is a destructive weed above ground and a serious medicinal root below it. You cannot patent a plant that covers 7 million acres and grows for free. There is no recurring revenue in a weed your customer can dig out of a ditch. Meanwhile, the alcohol industry has every incentive in the world to fund the next drink, and none at all to fund a vine that makes you want fewer. If you wanted to use it traditionally, here's the honest version. The preparation is the root, peeled, dried, and ground into that pale starch East Asian kitchens use. Kudzu powder is whisked into hot water to make a soothing, thick drink, or stirred into teas and soups. It's food and medicine, not magic. The young leaves are edible cooked, and the fragrant flowers go into jelly. It's a pantry ingredient everywhere it isn't feared. It's hidden in plain sight. Now the rules. Kudzu root can affect blood sugar and blood pressure. If you take medication for diabetes or hypertension, talk to your doctor first. Harvest only from clean ground. Remember that a great deal of kudzu has been treated with herbicides specifically to kill it. Wild harvesting is a risk. I'm telling you that the most hated plant in America has a root that Harvard found does something real. It's still out there, buried under the green. If you want the next forgotten plant we pull out of the vault, subscribe. Some were planted by the very people who'd later swear they were worthless. But the story doesn't end with the plant. In 2009, a new player entered, the Kudzu bug, an accidental traveler from Asia that finally started eating the vine. It seemed like a savior for southern forests, but the bug quickly found a second home in soybean fields, costing farmers millions in new damage. It was a stark reminder of ecological balance. When we move plants and insects across the globe, we trigger chains of events that last for generations. The Harvard researchers who first isolated daidzin weren't just looking at folklore. They were pioneering a new way of thinking about natural compounds. They found that by targeting specific enzymes, we could gently shift the body's response to addictive substances without the heavy side effects of synthetic drugs. The future of medicine might not just be in a lab, but in the forgotten weeds we've spent decades trying to eradicate. Kudzu is just one example. In parts of East Asia, harvesting kudzu is still a labor-intensive tradition. It requires deep knowledge of the land and a respect for the plant's dual nature. The processing involves multiple washes and long drying periods to ensure purity. The resulting starch is a culinary staple, valued for its texture and health benefits. So we come full circle, from a celebrated miracle vine to a hated monster, and finally to a potential life-saving medicine. It's a lesson in humility. The vine that ate the South isn't going anywhere. But maybe, as we look closer at what's buried underneath, we'll find more than just a weed. We have a whole vault of these stories, forgotten plants that have been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Join us for the next one. Subscribe to Landfield's Lab. This was the story of Kudzu. I'm Dr. Landfield, and I'll see you in the lab.